So the first symbol we started using was the tree. If sihr was made on a high place, so the person would wash with the water and take that water, throw it on any tree in a height with the intention of throwing on the sihr that has been made on her. And that works, alhamdulillah, perfectly. And that is nothing wrong with Sharia. It's just the intention. And alhamdulillah, it worked. So after that, we started generalizing this principle to any kind of sihr that has been made. For example, if the sihr was buried in the ground, we would pour the water on the ground with the intention of throwing on the sihr that was buried there. If the sihr was in a well, so we will throw the water in a well. If we can't reach a well, we will go to something high, like a bridge, and throw from the bridge with the intention of destroying the sihr that is in the well. And if the sihr was done in a grave, or using something of a dead person, we will take the water to a graveyard and empty it on any grave with the intention of throwing on the sihr that was put in the grave. If the sihr was made by knots, we will take a simple string and make some knots in it and dip it in the water that the person washed with, so he'll let it spend all the night with the knots, and in the morning throw that water. And we start doing like that any kinds of sihr. We will take something similar and put it in the water, or throw the water on a similar place. So, and it was working, alhamdulillah, and it was always confirmed. That means that even my students, when they were faced to some different cases that they did not meet before, that I did not meet, I did not teach, so they could themselves do the procedure and it will work. For example, some of my students told me that they had received a girl that never sweat. She never has any sweat. So what they did, they told her sister to wipe some sweat with a Kleenex and to put it in the water of her sister that did not sweat. And when she did that, next time she came for treatment, when they read Quran on her, she filled the whole room with sweat. So that problem was solved. And we had many confirmations that it works, alhamdulillah, and that is the nature of the sihr. That is a symbol. It's not, the important thing is not the particular place it was put in, but what does that place represent? Why is it meant to put it in that place, or to use such thing inside the sihr? But this method made us a problem. That people were saying, we went to Ben Halima, he told us to make knots, he told us to go to cemetery, he told us to do this, to do that. And the Imam said that this is sihr. It is sorcerers who do such things. And then it becomes very complicated to explain to them, no, this is just a symbolic, just the intention to destroy that sihr that was made there, like Musa alayhi salam with the sorcerers, when they threw their sticks and ropes, he also threw his stick. He did the same act. He did the same action, but they did it with the help of shaitan, and he did it with the help of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. So it is a question of intention, and it's not sihr, because sihr is a pact with shaitan, doing satanic things, and this thing has nothing satanic and nothing shirk inside. So it was difficult. Once the people went and heard bad things, and they keep on repeating, and this problem was getting bigger, and depending on the places and the cultures and the habits of people and how imams will interpret that thing. So then we changed completely the method, and instead of using the symbols of the sihr, we took verses that to solve that symbol. For example, if the sihr was in a grave, we take the verse أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيِّتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ كَمَنْ مَثَلُهُ فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ لَيْسَ بِخَارِجٍ مِنْهَا. Is the one who is dead, أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيِّتًا, the one who is dead, and we brought him back to life, and we gave him a light with which he walks amongst people. Is he same as the one who is in darkness, not coming out of it? So we add that verse in the Quranic water, and the person washes with it, and that sihr in the grave will be removed, without going to grave, without doing nothing, just by adding specific verses into the water. So in that way, we reached up to 45 verses for 45 different types of sihr. So we add those verses in the water, and the person will wash with, and the sihr will go. So that's made the treatment much easier, simpler, and there is no objection possible, because that is purely Quran. That is just Quran you are adding in the treatment, and the person will wash with it and will get cured by the will of Allah Ta'ala. So now to destroy the sihr, first you have to recognize what kind of sihr it is. So we recognize the kind of sihr by the symptoms. For example, if the sihr is in a grave, the person will be seeing dead people in his dreams, and he will be feeling like a dead person, being very tired and depressed, not having happiness in life, and thinking negatively. And I told you, if the sihr is in a high place, the person will be going round and round in his life, and his mental will be going always in imagination. And he would be dreaming of himself going up or flying or falling. So you have the details of these 35 kinds of sihr, how to recognize it from the symptoms. So when we discuss with the person, we will ask him what's his feeling, what's happening in his life, what's wrong, what does he see in his dreams, and see his emotions, and then we note all the types of sihr he has, and then for every type of sihr, we're going to add the verse, correspondent verse, into his treatment. So to add the verse in the treatment, in the beginning, we were reading the verses on the jerrycans. So that means that everyone must have his own jerrycan, and to do his own treatment. And we read the normal Roqya verses in those jerrycans, and then we're going to add for each person the verses that he needs. So we write down the symbols, then we search for each verse, and we read each verse 11 times into that water. So we had the option either to read the verses. So what we did then, instead of reading specific verses for each person in his own jerrycan, we put all the jerrycans together and we read the whole of the verses on all the jerrycans. So now each jerrycan contains the treatment for all 45 types of sihr. This makes it easier for us than having a specific jerrycan for each person. That was complicated. Then we also had the option of handwriting the verses on a paper and giving the paper to the person, so he will dip it in the bucket to dilute it. So that requires special ink, which is edible and which is dilutable. So it depends. Well, you can use za'faran, you can use any natural ink that is tahir, that is pure, and that is edible, and that is dilutable. And that also was not easy to write for each person the specific verses and give him the paper, because that takes quite a bit of time. So what we did, we wrote the full 45 verses on a sheet of paper and dilute that in a jerrycan and take some water from that jerrycan to prepare all the other jerrycans. And now, alhamdulillah, I'm just telling you this whole history so you understand where we have reached. So now we are printing with a printer the verses. All the 35 verses with a printer that is specially made for edible ink. Well, in the beginning, we can take any kind of printer with an ink printer and replace that ink by za'faran, by edible and dilutable ink. Well, when we do that, it will print some sheets of paper, then the printer will break, because that ink can never be compatible, can never be okay with the printer. So after some time, the printer is going to break. So it was worthwhile, even if you get 200 or 500 sheets of paper and then we throw away the printer, it was okay. We could afford it. But alhamdulillah, now recently these special printers have been made to print edible ink, and that is what we're using. So for a few years I was hesitating to move on to printing, because I was saying that writing the Quran by hand, that includes the intention of the person and the taqwa of the person and the intention of getting the ill person, the patient, cured. So what if a machine does it? Maybe that will have less barakah, less effect than if you do it by hand. So I was hesitating for years and thinking about it, because we cannot take a chance to give something wrong to patients and then they'll not be cured and said, oh, sorry, that was just an experience, now I'm going to give you a good treatment. So we could not take that chance with patients. So then I remembered that the Quran itself that everybody uses today is printed by machine. And in the early days of Islam, of course, there's no printer, so the Quran was written by hands. So, and all the hadith that you must respect the Quran, you need wuzu to touch it, you must not take it in the toilet, etc. They were applied for Quran that is written by hand. But once the Quran is printed by a machine, so everybody knows that all these rules on Quran still apply to the Quran that is printed by machine. And this Quran printed by machine is not less worthy than the Quran written by hand. So this convinced me to say, well, even if we print the Quran, that will not change the power and the efficiency of Quran. So we did it, alhamdulillah, it is working. So of course it is easier for us, but it is also more beneficial for the patients, because we can print much more verses for the same patient, instead of, for example, writing the 10 verses of the symbols of his 10 symbolic sorceries. He would get a sheet with all the 45 symbols. And we can also do more. That means if someone has a specific problem that is not going out, for example, if he has a sorcery in the grave that is not finishing, we can print a whole page with that verse of the sorcery in the grave. Some people also wish to have treatment with full Quran, so we can print the full Quran on 16 pages. So imagine if you wanted to write the full Quran with your hand, how that will not be possible. That will take 1 year, or I don't know how much time it will take. Or if you have to read the full Quran on the water, that will be very difficult. But now you can just print it and dilute it all in the water. So this is how this is concerning the symbols in sorcery. Yet when we do the diagnostic for one person, we have to search for all his symbolic sorceries and write them down, even though we're going to give him a sheet that contains the 45 verses for all kind of 45 sorceries. Why? For many reasons. The first reason is that sihr, when it is discovered, it gets weaker, and its effect is weaker. For example, if you are fighting with your wife and suddenly we tell you, or you understand that this fighting is because of sihr, someone made something to you to separate you from your wife or husband, so that makes you cool down. When you feel that anger, you say, no, there's nothing to be angry about. This is someone evil that has done this to me to separate me from my wife, so I'm not going to get angry. That means that when you know that there is sihr, it makes it weaker. So when we write them down, that is a part also of the treatment, to identify them and to write them down, and that is partly go to weaken them. Second reason is that we have to know what the patient has, so that when he will come back, we will see in his sheet what he had, and are these symptoms still going on, or are there new symptoms that come, so we can follow up the case of the patient. So this is why we have to write them down anyway. And the third reason is that if we are in a situation where we don't have these printed papers, so we must be able to use the old methods, either to read the verses on the jerrycan of the patient, or to give him the verses so he'll read himself at home on that water, or to write them down on a paper and give him the paper. So we must be able to treat those cases, even if we don't have the paper where all the verses are printed. We must know how to deal with it. So this was concerning the symbols and sorcery. May Allah Ta'ala accept us and use us for the good of Islam and Muslims. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.